Kasbarian, and I am the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America Western Region, and I am going to be introducing this morning's panel, Homeland and Diaspora Challenges, from Challenges to Solutions. And as I'm doing that, I want to ask an important question, and I think it's a question that many of you may have, and that is, why has this conference been organized? Why has ANC Grassroots been organized? Well, it's to discuss High Tide, to discuss the Armenian cause. But what is that? As far as the ANCA's work is concerned, the Armenian cause is often associated with genocide recognition. But it's much more than that. It's about recognition, yes. But it's also about demanding reparations. It's about giving a voice to our people, domestically and internationally. And it's about strengthening the homeland. I'm sure the scrupulous among you noted that this panel's name is not Armenia and the Diaspora. It is the Homeland and the Diaspora. And that's because the homeland is not only Armenia, but it is also Artsakh, it is also Javakhk, and it is also Western Armenia. And we must never forget that. These are the reasons why ANC Grassroots was organized. To present a thorough picture of these topics. But it's also to teach those who care about these issues how they can get involved. I say this constantly, but it's not that people don't believe in the Armenian cause. Many people do. It's that if each person does not get involved within their means in some way, those ideas and objectives that they believe in will remain just that, ideas and objectives. It's incumbent upon each one of us, each person within their means, to get involved, and Grassroots is meant to provide the tools to do that. Now, I'm going to introduce the moderator, whom I've known for a very long time, and who is an inspiration to me as a diasporan Armenian personally. He moved to Armenia many years ago to improve that country on the ground. And he still remains thoroughly committed to his work with the belief that he can and will make a difference. He is the chief of party of Counterpart International, an international non-governmental organization in Armenia. And he has led and blazed a path which I'm sure many people will follow. Before I introduce him, I want to just add a little note. We're on a tight schedule today, so I want to let everybody know that we will be getting out of here at 10:15. So when it comes time to the Q&A session, please make sure that you keep your questions concise, and our moderator, who I'm about to introduce, is going to help us with that. And I ask you to, and by the way, the first 3 sessions of today are going to be in this room. After that, according to the color on your badges, you'll be split up into breakout sessions, and those sessions are going to be taking place in the rooms to the right of you. Okay? So with that, I want to introduce Alex Sardar. Please welcome.
Thank you, William. Good morning, everyone. We're going to adjust the panel discussion, the order of speakers a little bit this morning because the special representative of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic in the US, Robert Avetisyan, one of our panelists, has to leave the session a little early because of other meetings. So we're going to ask him to speak first, then turn to your questions for a few minutes, and then turn back to the regular order of the panel. So I'd like to ask Mr. Avetisyan to join us at the podium and deliver his remarks.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, let me thank the organizers for having me here. It's very important for us, for Karabakh, is to communicate with you, to deliver what we have, to answer the questions, of course, and to share the concerns we may have. It's very important to talk about Karabakh. It's very important because Artsakh is an example of unity, courage, and which is most important, our Armenian victory. Our conflict is one of the most cruel confrontations in the world, especially in our part of the world, which is Europe. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict first appeared in 1918, when the newly independent Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Georgia began to demarcate their state border. And Azerbaijan began to put forward its claims towards millennia-old Armenian lands. And Chouldjian and Artsakh were just two of them. The League of Nations, which was antecedent of the United Nations at the time, they refused to recognize Azerbaijan because of the territorial claims towards neighboring Armenia. And this is very important to keep in mind that independent Azerbaijan had never included Artsakh in its composition. The situation of uncertainty lasted until 1920, when the region was Sovietized by the Soviet Russia, and we were incorporated by Stalin's infamous decision into Azerbaijan. And the situation of Armenian autonomy within Azerbaijan lasted until 1986, when the Gorbachev's era of perestroika and glasnost gave us the idea that we have a new chance to restore the injustice of the history and get the reunification with Armenia. It was mentioning that throughout the Soviet history we had always problems with the Soviet Azeri authorities. There were cases of murder, the clear policy of deportation of Armenians, the clear intention to change the demographic picture of the region were there. And as a result, Azeris, who were forming just 3% of Karabakh's territory by 1921, were forming 21% by 1989 population census. In 1988, on the wave of the perestroika and glasnost and the first ever democratic process in the Soviet Union, we appealed with the Soviet authorities and Soviet Armenian and Soviet Azeri authorities to be transferred to Armenia. Azerbaijan, of course, refused and replied to our peaceful demand by a wave of anti-Armenian pogroms, hundreds of miles away from the conflict zone, from the Artsakh proper. Pogroms in Baku, in Sumgait, in Kirovohrad, they took lives of innocent civilians and created the first flow of refugees in this conflict, thus escalating this peaceful process of legitimate demand into a military confrontation. Then we come to 1991, when the Soviet Union was about to collapse and Azerbaijan proclaimed independence basing on the Azerbaijani Republic of 1918 and 1920, which didn't include Artsakh. Following the same Soviet legislation, we proclaimed independence in full compliance with the Soviet Constitution, in full compliance with the legislation which provided independence for the rest of the Soviet republics. Unfortunately, Azerbaijan went even further and they launched a full-scale military offense against us, which resulted in almost complete destroy of our social, economic, and any other infrastructure. But As many of you know, probably as all of you know, we succeeded in defending our homeland. And in 1994, we forced the aggressor to go for a ceasefire, to ask for a ceasefire from the Nagorno-Karabakh authorities. Thank you. And ever since, there has been a negotiation process within the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe's Minsk Group, so-called Minsk Group, to develop a workable solution which can bring to positive peace in the region. Unfortunately, so far, the only result is that there is no active hostility, there is no resumption of full-scale military operations. Azerbaijanis are on the same positions they were in 92 or 94. They want to, they say take Karabakh back, but we never were there, so they want to take Karabakh. And of course that is something which is absolutely unacceptable for us, and that is something they will never see. Yes. I can assure you that. All right, the moderator asked me to be even briefer. And of course, I also think that the Q&A session is much more informative. So if you don't mind, I'll just stop there. Well, no, a couple of things I would like to mention. Even in the situation of blockade and permanent threat of war, we have been very successful in building as a state, in being as a democratic state, with almost complete eradication of corruption, with very well-functioning state institutions. And I'm talking about this institution not as an official, but as a regular Artsakh who was born and grew up there. Those of you who have been in Artsakh, I'm sure they will agree with me. Those of you who have not been there, I invite you to go there to see what we have reached through these 20 years of enormous sacrifices, challenges, solutions, development, tragedy of course, but still success. We are on the right path, and the first 20 years of our independence show that we're getting where we want to see our country, and this is just only the beginning of the restoration of the greater Armenia. So thank you very much.
What I'd like to do is, before I ask our friends Elizabeth and Antranig to speak, I want to frame our discussion. I think we're at a critical juncture in our history. We're 20 years into independence. I'm not supposed to get too close to the speakers. We're 20 years into our independence, and today is the shareholders meeting of this company. Okay? And we are talking about whether our investment has paid in dividends, whether we've seen what we have been hoping to see in Armenia. So let's talk about it. And in deference to Mr. Avetisyan, and you know, with the aim of having a healthier discussion, I don't think being critical, constructively critical, and asking the tough questions of ourselves, not of anyone else, but of ourselves, is necessarily being unpatriotic. It is actually being more so patriotic than simply allowing things to happen without improving them. Okay? So today, what I want to talk about is how do we move from patronage to partnership? How do we frame the discussion, our understanding of Armenia and the diaspora, the relationship that's so tortured and so complicated, but so absolutely essential for the survival of the Armenian nation, so that it moves from one of handouts to one of accountability and partnership. And in order to do that, let's start 20 years ago. The diaspora was caught by surprise by so many things, as was Armenia. Earthquake, war, independence. We weren't ready to address all of those issues in their complexity and in their depth that was required. So really, our approach to Armenia in the last 20 years has primarily been reactive. We have not had the chance to sit back and decide what is the vision that we have, what is the strategy that we're going to choose for this country, and how are we going to go about it. Examples abound of how that has happened. Okay? Election after election, we've been disappointed with the performance. Okay? recognition of the Armenian genocide internationally. There's always been double talk on the issue. Diaspora saying one thing, the Armenian state saying another thing. Diaspora is advocating for one thing, the Armenian state is not sure what it's advocating for. So there is a lot of uncertainty in this relationship, and it's because we haven't had the chance to sit back and talk about it and to ask for accountability. Armenia's residents, the citizens of Armenia, have a right to ask us as diasporans for accountability for what we do in Armenia, and we have the same right and responsibility of Armenian state officials and the citizens of Armenia. So this does not go one way, it's two ways. What has been the basis for our engagement so far has been crisis management. And the results are really detrimental, and that's why I believe this is the crucial juncture. If we continue the way we've been doing business with Armenia, we're not going to see much of an Armenia left in the next few decades. Truly so. We've lost major capital, social, political, and most painfully, human capital in Armenia. But we've also lost that here in the diaspora. Look, we have a diaspora community of more than 1 million people in the United States. It pains me to see that only 300, 400, 500 people are members of the Armenian Youth Federation. That's telling of where we are with the Armenian diaspora. If 1 million people, most conservative estimates, have left Armenia in the last 20 years, the numbers in our organization should have gone up. They haven't. Reasons are aplenty, and I'm not going to go into them. But there is an exodus happening, okay? And it's not just out of Armenia. It's out of being Armenian, okay? And we have to be cognizant of this, and we have to be able to face this very clearly. The impact that we wanted to see. Let me give you some numbers. Armenia, over the last 20 years, officially has received more than $10 billion in assistance from governmental sources, from non-governmental sources, from private foundations. And I'm not even talking about the remittances that occur that match the state budget of Armenia on an annual basis. Okay? I live in Armenia. I do not see $10 million worth of investment in Armenia every day. Okay? When someone gives me $100, I give it back to them and I say, I can't be responsible for those $100 to take to Armenia. You need to bring those $100 yourself and make sure that it's implemented the way you want it to be implemented. This is not only a problem of corruption in Armenia. This is a problem of giving blindly and not really asking for anything in return. You never go to a store and say, oh, here's my $100. I don't want that sweatshirt for it. You never do that. But we do that for Armenia. And that has led us to not see the real impact that we've been trying to see in Armenia. So why are we worried about this now? Not to go too deeply into this, without an Armenia, without a state of Armenia, a strong country of Armenia, the Armenian diaspora does not have much of a future left. Okay? The challenges that we face today in terms of emigration, in terms of our communities getting more spread out, the economic structure forcing us to not be part of a collective anymore, communication technology not allowing us or not necessitating us to be part of one structure anymore, is actually setting the ground for the disintegration of what we have known as the diaspora. 3,000 years, yes, we've survived. But 3,000 years we've survived against all odds and in places where we've been able to remain collective. In the United States of America, 1 million people live who call themselves Armenian, but we don't know where they are and who they are. That's the Armenian diaspora. The next generation is probably going to know less about their heritage. And 100 years from now, I'm not sure what's going to happen. Okay, so we need to focus our energy on making sure that there is a state of Armenia. That is the core, the magnetic core of who we are. The exodus I mentioned, and it's really serious. Let me give you another number. Based on recent numbers of emigration out of Armenia and the low birth rate in Armenia, if the rates continue the way they are, statistically speaking, by 2058, That's 40 years from now. By 2058, there will be one person left in Armenia. Okay? One single person will be left in Armenia. Azerbaijan has a 37% growth rate in their population. Anatolia has a growth rate of 23%. The numbers make sense. So if we want to see Armenia in the next half a century, we need to get into gear. Okay? And today's exodus is not like the one of the early 90s. It is not one of political economic crisis. It's voluntary. It is people who are in the upper middle class in Armenia, who have jobs, who have great incomes, who choose to leave the country because they cannot guarantee a fair, lawful future for their children. Okay? And we can all relate to that. So there are plenty of reasons why we need to care about this. And the realities in Armenia have changed, but our rhetoric has not changed. You know, I'm very supportive of the Armenia Fund, telethon, and generally the work that they do. Yesterday, I caught a few minutes of the telethon, and I have to be honest with you, I don't watch it regularly. The language that was used and the way we were spoken to as an audience has not changed in the last 10 years, has not changed in the last 15 years. Armenia is not the recipient of our charity anymore. It cannot remain the recipient of our charity anymore. It needs to become a full-fledged, accountable partner in this relationship. The next 20 years, we need to seriously move from what we think we know about Armenia to what is real in Armenia. Okay? Today's Armenia has issues like domestic violence. It has issues like HIV/AIDS rates that are the highest in the region. It has issues like poverty at 53%. Okay? These are serious issues. Okay? But these are not issues that we can throw money at and hope for the best. These are issues that require all of us to be on the ground and working on these issues. Okay? Robert Avetisyan, sitting over there, comes to Armenia every few months, and we meet and we talk about what do we do next to stem domestic violence? What do we do next to create shelters, or hopefully to stop creating shelters for abused women, wives, daughters, mothers? Today's Armenia has an employment problem, has an education system that is not producing what Armenia needs. It's not even producing what the world needs. Okay, Armenians are leaving the country to get educated. And guess what? They're never returning to Armenia. Because there is no future for them in Armenia. That's the reality of Armenia today. Okay? And we need to be able to address these issues. This next point I'm going to make, I'm going to ask for your deference, and because it goes to the core, to the heart of who we are. We have, in the diaspora, we have relied on organizations to collect us, to guide us, to educate us, to move us forward. And much of that has survived because of dogma, because organizational structure, because of organizational hierarchy, because of ways that have been successful in us being together. Well, guess what? Today's Armenia and today's diaspora has one thing that we didn't have before. It has young people who onto themselves, with an iPhone, with a phone, with a laptop, are entire organizations and movements onto themselves. Okay? They begin and end movements. Okay? They create chaos, they end chaos. And if we are not able to understand this and try to capture that momentum in a way where we're facilitating a more impactful relationship between a diasporan organization or individual and an Armenian organization and individual, then we're going to lose this battle. This is not a forewarning. This is what's happening now. Okay? Those 1 million individuals who are not part of this organization have their own individual relationship with Armenia. And we don't know what that relationship is like. Okay? Moving forward, I don't want to keep repeating myself. So what now? We need to really, and I think this is what our panelists are going to be talking about today. We need to re-examine our assumptions. We truly need to sit back and say, okay, listen, we love Armenia. We wouldn't be doing this if we didn't love Armenia. We love the Armenian cause. There is something inherent to our existence that has brought us to this table, okay? However, what we have done has given us minimal results. We need to understand what more needs to be done. So we need to examine assumptions. We need to have the courage to ask ourselves the tough questions that will keep us accountable. We need to be accountable for what we are saying and doing, what we are giving, and how much time we are giving to Armenia and to the Armenian cause. Because really, as William said in the beginning, the recognition of the genocide is one piece of the Armenian cause. In my mind, the strategic objective of this company is the statehood, the strengthened statehood of Armenia, which will eventually lead to larger Armenia. If that is not possible, then we're just having a great Thanksgiving weekend here. If that's not our objective, then we're not talking real things. We need to go deeper into our problems. Things like domestic violence, things like working with NGOs, nonprofits in Armenia on their specific issues. Young people are thirsty for things in Armenia. There isn't enough information. There isn't enough for them to be engaged. Look at us around this table. Each one of us could be a whole library for one person in Armenia by simply talking to them, by simply engaging with them. We don't even need to do anything else. We need the critical mass. Folks, I have to tell you, having lived in Armenia for 10 years now, I see the effect, the impact one contact can have. Now imagine if we take that and multiply it by 1,000, by 10,000, by 20,000. Okay? It takes a little bit of sacrifice. I have not sacrificed by moving to Armenia. Those who I know who moved to Armenia have not sacrificed. It's not a sacrifice. Engaging with Armenia is the opportunity of a lifetime today. It's the land of opportunity. We need to be able to reframe this entire issue in our minds to be able to move to the next level of building this nation state. If we don't, if you take nothing away from this conference this weekend, I want you to go home, go to your office, take a post-it note and write 2058 on that. And the number 1 next to it. And whenever you get tired, look at that number and think about those who never saw an independent Armenia. Those who died hoping and dreaming about an independent Armenia. And then ask yourself, is this going to happen on our watch? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite Antranig Kasbarian, who's going to lead the discussion on self-determination and Karabakh, how this issue today fits into our understanding of the larger discussion on Homeland and Armenia. I mean, Homeland and Diaspora.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you to the organizers of this very well-organized and well-attended conference. It's truly a pleasure to be here. In the short time allotted to me, I'd like to discuss the question of self-determination as it applies to Karabakh. Open up the concept a bit, evaluate it critically, and then look at some current issues, some current tactical issues that we face, and what we can do about it we, that is, organized diasporan Armenians. Okay, are we set up here? I'm not able to see the screen. Oh, I can see it in the mirror. Ասիսկապես հայկական ծերնարգ է, ամեն ինչ թարս դարձավ։ Հայրին գնայի ու ճիշտ հագարակ պատկերը գտեցել։ Look, let me begin with some general definitions. Mr. Avetisyan did me a service by introducing the subject. When Karabakh Armenians rose to their feet in 1987 and 88, they did so in the name of national self-determination. They also did so in other ways. They also rose in the name of an Armenia dispossessed. They rose in the name of Armenians who sought to reclaim historic Armenian territories. But from a concrete political standpoint, the Armenian demand in Karabakh was for the right to exercise the right to self-determination. Okay, so let's use that as our starting point. What do we mean when we speak of national self-determination? Let me resort to a dictionary definition. National self-determination is a principle in international law that nations have the right to freely choose their sovereignty and their international political status. This national right is exercised without any external compulsion or external interference. It's a very fine-sounding principle, but it leaves a lot of things unsaid. The principle of self-determination does not state how the decision is to be made, what the outcome should be, whether that should be independence for that nation, federation, protection, or some form of autonomy. It also doesn't state what other principles might lie in contradiction to self-determination. And we saw the bitter realities of that in 1988 when Armenians rose and, according to the Soviet Constitution, I believe Article 76 said the Soviet Constitution allows us the right to choose our sovereignty status, and we choose to secede from the Azerbaijan SSR and to reunify with the Armenian SSR. Of course, Azerbaijan countered by citing the very next article, Article 77, saying that all of the Union republics have the right to exercise their territorial integrity. Azerbaijan naturally would say that the secession of Karabakh is a violation of their territorial integrity. And there, of course, comes the stalemate. The stalemate led, of course, to hostilities which eventually broke out into all-out war. So let me say that the right to self-determination is something that we continue to stand on. It is something that the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic continues to stand on. But we also have to understand that not only are there conflicting rights, but in the end, at the end of the day, international law has rarely decided such disputes. Usually, it's been by dint of force, by dint of armed struggle, that such matters are resolved. And usually, the stronger power wins. What did they say? 9/10 of the law is what? Possession is 9/10 of the law. And that's what the Armenians did. They didn't sit around in boardrooms waiting for some decision from the international court. We ended up taking to arms, fighting a liberation struggle, and winning. Of course, that victory was a provisional one. And since the ceasefire in 1994, now for 17 years, there have been ongoing negotiations supervised by the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which has a department, the Minsk Group, that supervises negotiations between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and primarily supervised by Russia, France, and the United States. So let's talk a little bit about what self-determination actually means in the Karabakh context. And let's open up the concept a bit to critical evaluation. Next slide. Okay, yeah, this is really challenging for me here. Yes, okay, let's go on. Next slide. So self-determination for Karabakh. What did it mean in 1988 when Armenians took to the streets and petitioned Moscow peacefully? And what does it mean today, 23 years later? Actually, the exercise of the right to self-determination has changed from then till now. Let's go to the next slide. I think the best way to explain this is with a map. If you look within the region, you'll find this kidney-shaped structure here. This kidney-shaped terrain is the NKAO, the Nagorno-Karabakh Autonomous Oblast. Is this kidney-shaped territory. The NKAO petitioned Moscow in 1988 for the right to secede. If somehow Moscow had agreed to the Armenian demand, that territory, and that territory alone, would have been attached somehow to Armenia, presumably with some land bridge connecting it. The Armenian demand today is quite a bit different. As you know, Armenians fought a liberation war, fought against immense odds, drove out Azerbaijani occupation, and ended up taking territory outside of the NKAO, what we refer to as Chouldjian Karabakh, that is not mountainous Karabakh, but the Karabakh plains. And those are the surrounding territories that today are called the liberated territories. These include territories that are known to you by name: Aghdam to the east, Fizuli and Jabrail to the south, Kashatagh, which includes formerly 3 Azerbaijani districts, Lachin, Gubatli, and Zangelan, and Kelpachak to the north. Today, Karabakh Armenians say very clearly and unequivocally, these liberated territories are part of the deal. Okay. We're not talking about the NKAO anymore, we're talking about the NKR. Now, of course, Azerbaijan tries to portray this as aggression, that somehow Karabakh is not only fighting a war for the NKAO, they've taken territory away from Azerbaijan. Karabakh's reply to that is twofold. One is that if you look historically, many of these territories are ethnically Armenian. You go to these lands, especially in the Kashatagh area, you find cemeteries, ruined villages, all sorts of cultural artifacts, relics that indicate that this area was historically Armenian and basically became Azerified due to ethnic cleansing. From 1918 to 1920, those areas were completely wiped clean of their Armenian population. So yes, while technically they may have been Azerified from 1920 to 1990, before and after, and before for centuries, these areas were largely Armenian populated and were cultural hearths for our Armenian populations. But secondly, and perhaps even more importantly, Karabakh authorities say that without these liberated territories, Karabakh faces the same problem that it faced back during the war. Okay. Azerbaijan sought to encircle Armenians, sought to bomb them into submission, and basically took Karabakh's island status, enclave status, and sought at all costs to separate it from Armenia. Essentially, what Karabakh Armenians are saying is that Azerbaijan is not fit to govern Karabakh. And they have, in a sense, forfeited the right to those territories by their act of aggression. Armenians peacefully petitioned Moscow. They were met with military aggression. So the Armenian reaction now is, we need these liberated territories to buffer ourselves from any future attack, from any future encirclement by Azerbaijani authorities. Okay, so today, self-determination means something somewhat different than it did in 1988. In essence, the Azerbaijanis really gambled and lost. You know, they played a bad hand at the casino. You know, they sought to respond to our demand in 1988 through military aggression, lost, and ended up losing twice as much territory. Now, let's talk about the negotiations. Next slide. Okay, reaching a negotiated solution. Here we face some real obstacles. First of all, let me say this. These negotiations have been going on now for 17 plus years. It's anybody's guess as to how long the negotiations will continue. I would hazard a guess that barring any major changes, these negotiations will continue for years to come. I think we can view the glass as half empty. I would prefer to view the glass as half full. If we're proactive in creating facts on the ground and consolidating Karabakh's independence, let the negotiations continue. Let them resume for decades if necessary, while we all the while consolidate our independence on the ground. But having said that, we have these real negotiations to deal with. Let's talk about them. Azerbaijan has emphasized the principle of territorial integrity and emphasized that Karabakh and Armenia have violated that principle. Azerbaijan's emphasis actually is more on Armenia than it is on Karabakh. They seek to present a lateral playing field, pitting Armenia versus Azerbaijan, with Karabakh the prize. Karabakh is the apple of discord. Okay. And they present Armenia as the aggressor. The configuration that Armenia and Karabakh have presented is somewhat different. Okay. Armenia and Karabakh say, no, this is not about rivalry between two nation states over Karabakh. This is about Karabakh's indigenous population waging an independence struggle. In essence, our view is that this is not inter-ethnic or international rivalry. This is really an anti-colonial struggle. Karabakh was essentially a colony, a colonized people of Azerbaijan. And like the other colonized peoples of Asia, Africa, the colonized world, Karabakh had the right to fight its liberation struggle to throw off the yoke of colonial oppression. So Armenia and Karabakh have consistently been saying, this is Karabakh's war to fight, and Armenia is playing a supporting role. Now, we all understand that supporting role was rather substantial. Armenia is the lifeline for Karabakh's security. It provides quite a bit in terms of budgetary resources, military resources. We all understand that. But internationally, publicly, Armenia's role is as support, as buttress for Karabakh's self-determination claim. Hence, we have the Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. Right? Karabakh could have easily said, no, we want to join Armenia. We're part of a greater Armenia. But in order to navigate these negotiations successfully, Karabakh has decided, and Armenia has decided, it's much more efficacious to present this as a self-determination struggle by Karabakh for Karabakh. Now, what do we do to create facts on the ground, to bolster facts on the ground as these negotiations continue? Let's go to the next slide. Obviously, I mean, point one goes without saying. Mr. Avetisyan said it himself. Military preparedness, continual upgrading of our military capabilities is essential. But let's assume that for the moment. Let's assume that Armenian Karabakh and the diaspora are doing everything they can to maintain military readiness. What do we do within the negotiating framework to bolster our hand, to strengthen our hand? Well, one thing we must do, in my opinion, is to re-emphasize Karabakh as a side to the negotiations. This is not just about Armenia negotiating with Azerbaijan. Karabakh is an integral part of those negotiations and must have a seat at the table. This is something, unfortunately, that got lost in the shuffle when Robert Chouldjian became president of Armenia. Chouldjian, who is in many ways a very agile and deft negotiator, I think he missed it on this one. he essentially said, look, I was the president of Karabakh, now I'm the president of Armenia. So let's cut out the middleman. I speak for everyone. I think that was rather short-sighted on his part. Having Karabakh involved in the process makes it a more complicated and, frankly, a more level playing field for us to navigate. So this is something I think that through our lobbying efforts we constantly must emphasize. Of course, first and foremost, we have to emphasize this to the Armenian government. But we also need to emphasize it to the US, to the Russians, to the French, who are supervising these OSCE discussions. The second item is that we need to mount a major international drive for recognition of the NKR. That recognition can come at the official level. Many of you have read the statement of the Uruguay foreign minister where he said that his country is prepared, or he is prepared, to push for his country's recognition of the NKR. This is a very, very significant point. The recognition of Karabakh, in a sense, puts a freeze on the whole negotiating process because Azerbaijan, to this day, does not even countenance Karabakh's claim to independent status. Okay? So it's very important to mount this recognition effort, and I think you will see that in coming months, the ANC is going to be a big part of that drive for international recognition. And I believe that so be ready, folks, we're going to need your help. And the Karabakh governments are willing and natural partner in this enterprise. And they have met with us and expressed their readiness to cooperate with us fully in this effort. Recognition, of course, can come at other levels too. As you probably know, I mean, the ANCA has hammered away at USAID to fulfill its commitments, according to US law, to provide aid to Karabakh. Not only humanitarian aid, but we hope developmental aid as well. Okay, let's move to the next slide and then I'm going to wrap up. Okay, just as important as our lobbying efforts is the work that we must do to bolster the facts on the ground in Karabakh. In Karabakh, which is an unrecognized republic, and especially in the liberated territories, which are like wilderness areas, there are no international lending agencies there. The World Bank doesn't operate in Lachin, USAID, any of these groups. They're not there. And perhaps we should be thankful that they're not there. But what it really means is the burden is all on us. It is on Armenia to some extent, although Armenia's hands are somewhat constrained. If Armenia is saying, hey, we're not driving this, this is all Karabakh, Armenia has to be careful, has to perform some fancy footwork with regard to the liberated territories. But the Karabakh government, they've really begun under Bako Sahakian's leadership to become more vocal and more muscular regarding the liberated territories. You may have read the press release. The Prime Minister announced last month that they're going to build a second main highway linking Karabakh to Armenia. Not just the Lachin corridor road, but now a second road through Kelbajar that will connect Karabakh to the Sevan region of Armenia. Extremely important, extremely important. But alongside the recent positive efforts of Karabakh, we've got a lot to do. One thing that, frankly, we have failed at is promoting widespread resettlement of these liberated territories. If possession is 9/10 of the law, we should have tens of thousands of people living on these lands by now. Okay. The resettlement efforts to date have been feeble. The Karabakh government has largely taken a light approach, although again, in the last few years, we've noticed some changes. There are very few diasporan groups, NGOs, that deal with the liberated territories. We've got to bolster the economy there, attract settlers there, create permanent facts on the ground so those lands can never be given back. And my last comment, before turning it back to Alex, is regarding a sort of special niche issue that I think deserves greater attention. You know, we talk about Karabakh sometimes as an island unto itself, but we forget that Karabakh is found within a larger regional context. Particularly, Karabakh is now home to thousands of Armenian refugees from Azerbaijan. Who is going to stand up for the rights of all of those Armenians? You know, tens of thousands of Armenians used to live in Baku, Sumgait, Ganja, other places within Azerbaijan. They're all gone. They were all cleansed, either driven out or killed. Okay. What happened to their homes, their properties, their bank accounts, etc.? Poof, it's all gone. Who's going to mount some sort of reparation claim for these people? Well, I will say there's a fledgling group. It was established about 5 years ago called the Assembly of Armenians from Azerbaijan. They have offices now in little cells operating in Armenia, in Moscow, and some other CIS republics. This was actually a bright idea initiated by NKR former Foreign Minister Arman Melikian. And it's something I think we should think about supporting and reinforcing. I think a natural argument we can make is these refugees from Azerbaijan, they are welcome in Karabakh. They are welcome to live in those liberated territories. And Azerbaijan don't even think about making claims to those lands, because these lands are the just recompense for everything we lost, everything you took from us. So this is an additional lever, if you will, that we can use to complicate and to enrich the negotiating process. And again, my belief is the longer these negotiations take, as long as we're working actively to create facts on the ground, the longer these negotiations take, the better off we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antranig. I'm going to do a check-in with our organizers back there. We need more time.
Go ahead, we'll shave off from lunch.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, thank you for the extra time. Moving from Karabakh to Javakhk, two similar yet very different situations, instances of how contemporary issues impact diaspora-homeland relations. Chouldjian has just returned recently from Javakhk, where this was her third trip to Javakhk. And I'd like to invite her to come up and give us, share some of her insights with us, after which we'll turn it back to the Grassroots for a larger discussion. Thanks. That's it.
First of all, I want to thank Alex, I want to thank Antranig, I want to thank Robert Avetisyan for setting a framework here for the excellent dialogue we're going to have later on with regards to solutions and challenges facing the region. And I want to particularly thank the ANC Western region for including Javakhk in the discussions when we're talking about the challenges facing the homeland and facing the diaspora. You know, the challenges in Javakhk are nothing new to many of the people in this room. The Armenian Relief Society in the Western region of the United States, in chapters all around the world, has been doing diligent work, effort to bring about real social service, positive implementation in that region. They're one of many Armenian organizations who've started following in the ARS's lead to do that effort. You may have read about the Armenian cultural and language concerns in Asparez, in the Armenian Weekly, and in other publications educating us about the situation there. The dismal plight of the economy in the region, the political disenfranchisement of the Armenian people there. You know, I saw a number of these challenges in my visits in 2003 and 2006. You know, impassable roads to the region, either from Tbilisi to Javakhk or from Hayastan to Javakhk. Electricity issues, heating in the winter, crumbling buildings, and I'm not just talking about private homes, I'm talking about hospitals, I'm talking about schools. High levels of unemployment precipitated by years of isolation, lack of meaningful investment, the closing of the Russian army base there in 2007, which accounted for a significant number of jobs for local Armenians in that area. So in September of this year, ANCA Chairman Ken Chouldjian and I had the opportunity to visit the region once again, but this time with a different mission. Not just to better understand the challenges that the Armenian community is facing there, but to see what additional role the Armenian American community can play to find solutions. Because at the end of the day, it's not enough to talk about the challenges. It's all about addressing those and finding the solutions, as this panel aptly states. This was different than previous visits. Sure, we visited with the Armenian community leaders, the non-government organizations, the Armenian church representatives in Javakhk and Tiflis. However, after meeting with them and hearing their concerns, we returned to Tiflis and held discussions with U.S. representatives in the country. Ambassador Bass, who represents the United States is the U.S. ambassador there. The USAID representatives, the Millennium Challenge Corporation representatives in the region, to see what actually is the U.S. doing in Georgia, and specifically, what are we doing in Javakhk. We also had unprecedented access to leaders in the Georgian government, the foreign minister, Minister Vashatze, the cultural minister, and high-level representatives in the ministries of education, regional development, justice, national security, all of whom answered a myriad of questions on issues facing the Armenian community in Javakhk and in Georgia. And as the conversations developed in each of these instances, what became abundantly clear is the disconnect between the vision articulated by the Georgian government and the reality that the Armenian community is facing in the region today. So the question is, as we're looking for solutions, how do we bridge the gap between the Georgian vision and the reality on the ground? And for the sake of this conversation, how do we address the three primary issues facing the Armenian community there right now? Economic viability, Armenian identity, and broader political autonomy within a diverse, decentralized, and democratic Georgia. Before I go into each one of those specific items, I want to give a little bit of background here. Javakhk, as we know it, is part of a administrative region called Artsakh and Javakhk. It's one of 12 different regions in Georgia. It's about 2,470 square miles. It's located in the southern part of Georgia, and it is bordered by Armenia and Turkey. Armenians are 55% of the population in Artsakh and Javakhk, which, according to 2002 numbers, is about 207,600 Armenians in that area. Less now, but we'll talk about the reasons for that. Javakhk itself, Artsakh and Javakhk, I should say, has 6 districts. They're listed on the map up there. Ninotsminda, Akhalkalaki, and Akhaltsikhe have the largest percentages. If you talk of Armenians, if you talk about Ninotsminda and Akhalkalaki, we're talking about 99% and 95% respectively. Akhaltsikhe, which is the administrative capital of the region, is about 37% Armenian, down from what it was probably 20 years ago when it was a majority Armenian. And then we have Aspinza, Borjomi, and Adigeni, which have smaller percentage of us Armenians. If you look at the map, you're going to notice that there's more than 6 administrative districts there. There's one more district, Tsalka, that's up to the top and right of the area. Salka is technically not in Sanspe Javafeti, but for the purposes of this conversation and for the Armenian community there, it's included in what we would call Javakhk. It has a majority Armenian population. It's in neighboring Kvemo-Kartli, which is the whole region of Kvemo-Kartli is primarily Azeri. The seventh, Ninos Minda and Afal-Kalak are generally considered the historical Armenian territory of Javakhk. That's what we talk about when we went to our AYF lectures and we were kids and we were talking about the return of Afal-Kalak. This was what we were talking about in terms of Javakhk. It's located on a high, rocky plateau. It's isolated from the rest of Georgia. Two main reasons. One, until very recently, it had absolutely terrible roads, as I mentioned, so it was almost impossible to get there during the winter time, or at least half the portion of the year. And the second issue was during the Soviet era, because Javakhk had a border with Turkey, it was considered a security zone, and so it was restricted area. You actually, if you were an Armenian in Tiflis, you needed to get special permission to actually go to Javakhk. And so that really led to the further isolation of the Armenian community there. Javakhk is primarily an agricultural area. Idaho beware, it's a prime potato growing territory. According to the Georgia Department of Statistics, Javakhk constitutes 37% of Georgia's potato crop. And in fact, a number, unfortunately, that has gone down over the last several years. But it's primarily, as I said, agricultural. It deals with dairy, producing meat, products, this type of thing. So getting back to our three main concerns that deal with Javakhk today. Economic viability. When we sat down with Armenians, whether it's NGOs, young, old, college graduate, just out of high school, we asked them, what is the single greatest challenge you are facing right now? To a person, they all said, jobs. Georgia has seen an economic revival, ladies and gentlemen, over the last several years, primarily in Tbilisi. But the regions, like Sanspe Javafeti, have not followed suit. And so you have a situation where in the 12 administrative districts that kind of make up Georgia, that includes Tbilisi as the capital, Javakhk is 8 in terms of various economic indicators. When we talk about unemployment in Georgia, the number that normally is stated in the CIA fact book, even by the Georgian government, is somewhere around 17 to 19%. But if we're talking about Javakhk and the regions overall, we're not talking about 17, we're not talking about 20, we're talking about 25% minimum, and if you count underemployment in that region, you're talking about 40%. All of this was exacerbated, as I said, with the closing of the Russian base in 2007, which led to the loss of thousands of jobs in an already economically impacted region. So I mentioned earlier this disconnect between the Georgian government's vision for the region and what the Armenians are seeing there right now. When we met with each of the different Georgian government officials, they said, look folks, all the regions are hurting. It's not just the Armenians. We're focusing on tourism, we're focusing on other sectors. We promise we will get to you. We will get to help the Armenians in Javakhk. We understand your pain. The problem is, the people of Javakhk simply don't have the luxury of that time. With significant unemployment, families are splitting up in front of our eyes. Men are moving to Russia in order to take care of their families, or to Armenia in some cases. Students after graduation from university are resettling elsewhere because there simply are no opportunities there. The Georgian government says, look, I just spent $211 million in your area helping fix the roads between Javakhk and Tiflis, between Javakhk and Armenia. This is going to be a way to boost the economic situation there. We would point out that that $211 million that we've talked about is in fact U.S. government money spent by the U.S. Millennium Challenge Corporation. And we would point out that unfortunately the work that needs to be done around those regions in order to boost the economic development so people can use those roads hasn't been done yet. Let me talk about Armenian identity for a second. I would say outside of Armenia, Georgian Armenians have a unique situation in that the public school system in Georgia is set up to have both Georgian schools and ethnic schools within their system. So you have, next to the Georgian schools, on equal level in terms of public schools, you have Armenian schools, Russian schools, Azeri schools, etc., which actually teach in all the classes in those ethnic languages. So imagine when we have our Armenian kids going to Javakhk public schools, to the 140 schools that are in that region, they are studying math, science, social studies in Armenian. And if we were living in a system where they would then be able to utilize that language along with the Georgian language, which they're certainly taught in those classes, in those schools, to be able to participate in the civic life of that country, then we would be in great shape. Here's the problem. Anything Georgian government related is done in Georgian. And that has been a change that's come up over the past 10 years. And so now you have a situation where you have these kids who don't get a particularly good Georgian language education because, quite frankly, nobody wants to move to Javakhk in order to teach there in Georgian. And the folks, and despite the economic incentives that are brought to them, teachers, in fact, Georgian language teachers in Javakhk are paid twice what other class teachers, Armenian, like math or science or whatnot, are taught, because it's an incentive to get these folks out there, but not the best ones are going there. And so when these folks are graduating, they don't have a strong mastery of the Georgian language, and it's one less opportunity to find jobs. They can't participate in the civic life. They can't participate in the Georgian government's civil society work and whatnot, civic work. And to this, we have efforts by the Georgian government to do reintegration, to expand the process, and they do this by putting in a new law. This is going to be fascinating, where they're going to be, in order to help, I guess, teach Georgian, they're going to now institute the 70-30 rule that says that every single class in the Armenian schools, or in Azeri schools, or Russian schools, have to be taught 70% in Armenian, or the ethnic language, 30% in Georgian. I want you guys to imagine this with your kids. Your child is going to school, and they're being taught math in 70% in one language and 30% in a different language, by teachers who frankly don't have the capacity, very likely, to teach in that second language, the math or the science or whatever it is. And so here we go back to that disconnect, right? On paper, it sounds great. We're going to be teaching these young people better Georgian. They're going to be able to better integrate into society while keeping their language, except that in reality, when you look at the trickling down of this effort, it's not getting there. And the people are getting frustrated by this reality. And they're looking at the reintegration calls by the government and saying, you know what, Georgian government, you may be doing this in an effort for reintegration. What we're seeing here is an effort to assimilate us. And so now, as in this effort, the community is looking and saying, we need a different solution to this. We want sustainable peace. We want stability in the region. But we need to get there through meaningful political autonomy, broader rights, political rights in Javakhk, within a diverse, decentralized, and democratic Georgia. And that's the third area. So what can we do as I wrap this up? Where are we at? Well, the number one concern they had was jobs. If we don't help in terms of economic opportunities, just as Alex was talking about 2058 and 1 Armenian left in Armenia, I don't know this rubric or the numbers for Javakhk, but I can say it's going to depopulate much faster than that. And so our job now, and an effort that we've already started, is to work with the US government, which has pledged about $1 billion in assistance to Georgia, to see that the amounts that go to Georgia fairly also help the Javakhk region. And not just stop there. To see of that and other international funds that are going to the region, how can we leverage those with Armenian investments? Armenians want to invest in Javakhk. Armenians are worried to invest in Javakhk because they're concerned that the political pressures, the instability in the region is going to, frankly, undermine their investment. So if we can create a fund, a development fund, that will help leverage donor funds and individual Armenian funds to help bring jobs to Javakhk. That's the number one priority. And then build upon that by educating, whether it's US officials in Congress, educating USAID, educating our community on a broader basis about how they can be a part of that movement to help save Javakhk, one job at a time. To help save Javakhk, one student at a time in these classrooms. So the solutions, we're starting the solutions, and hopefully through ANC Grassroots, we can come together and make those a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antranig, thank you, Elizabeth, for very informative talks.